Welcome to the Iowa Great Lakes. I'm Tom Matuska along with Brett Wingfield with the Matuska Taxidermy Supply Company, and we're here today again on a Thursday afternoon, and it's a warm one out there, but it's pretty decent weather. We got a little wind to cool us down, and we're in the, did they say yesterday was our first day of summer or something like that?
Yeah, yep.
We're in the heart of summer kind of, and the tourists are rolling in here, and next week is going to be a zoo as we approach the 4th of July, and all of our fireworks stands are opening like crazy and doing a banner business. And about, I'm going to say, Wednesday, you're going to see the highway get pretty busy out here, and everybody's going to come to Paradise for their 4th of July vacation.
Yep. Corn's growing.
Corn's growing, yeah.
Gosh, got to be waist high by now. I think the saying is knee high by the 4th of July. I bet it's going to be waist high.
That's an old saying.
Yeah.
People are getting taller all the time. If you joined us last week, we showed you pedestal backs on the deer. We did a couple deer for you and how we cover them in leather, and that's it's a good commercial look. It's professional looking. It feels nice, attractive. You can get real creative with the kind of braids you put around it. Different color leathers. We showed you some of the artificial things that you can pick up at, like Joann Fabrics or Hobby Lobby. They have real Naugahyde type stuff, leather looking material. We had chunk of ostrich out here. You can get all different kinds of patterns and different skin textures that also look real nice. And as we said last week, remember that the artificials do not stretch, so you're going to have to be real exact in your cutting, and you're going to have to be real exact in your application, or you're going to have to get wider braid to hide whatever went wrong. But that's just how we take care of a lot of our pedestals, especially customer pedestals. It's one of the easier methods and more professional. Some people use felt, different materials. That's okay. Nothing looks quite as rich as leather to me. You can pick out different materials. I've seen people take Flexstone. Do they still make that Flexstone that sprays rocks? You can do that sort of thing, and you may have your own method that you even like better than what we do, and we'd love to hear it. If you have a good idea, share it with us, because we'll let everybody else see what other people are doing around the country. So along with that, this goes hand in hand. We've got a couple pedestals here, and this is a big whitetail pedestal that is going to be a rock base. It's going to be kind of a simple base, but it's just going to be rock. And then we also have that elk. The elk has detachable antlers. Why it looks like it's not a cow pedestal. It's a great big mega bull with velvet antlers, and you're going to get to see that from the process. We'll probably pick it up next week if we have time before the 4th of July, and we'll be finishing that and show you that. That one will go on a really nice walnut base, real pretty. It'll have a nice semi-gloss finish and a rail around the top, rail around the bottom. It's probably, I guess I'd say, our higher end mount. It looks very professional. It's a combination of a real rustic base. It's going to be a rock and grass and earth base on a really pretty walnut, almost like an end table type finish. So we're going to follow that one all the way through. But again, kind of like the cooking shows, we've got a couple projects here to show you, and we'll go back and forth, and we'll get both of these done, I suppose, at about the same time. The first thing, whenever you're doing a pedestal, you have to be concerned with what kind of attachment you have, and everybody makes a different kind of attachment. Every supply company has, rods and tubing, and we have so many different varieties downstairs. It's hard to choose one over the other. After you've used a couple of them, you will kind of pick your favorite. Some of them are just easier than others, and for this one, is this a pedestal rod?
That's the square, that is our square stock pedestal.
Square stock with a
Yes.
square sleeve. And on the elk, we have our, on something that big where you have a lot of weight, and those antlers are heavy. And you're going to have, I mean, this whole elk is kind of cantilevered over. The antlers help center the balance a little bit, but it's still a heavy piece. Rather than some of them that are on the market, we choose to have our welder make us something like that. Should we turn that around and show them just exactly
Sure.
what we got going?
Absolutely.
If we can do it without.
This off, and she might be able to get.
Oh, good.
I
All right.
bet she can get a good view like that.
Yeah, go ahead and zoom right up inside that rock.
We might have to turn in just a little bit more. Camera.
We don't want to knock him off the table at this
deer.
point. Yeah, or the deer.
There we go.
Now this is like 1/4-inch steel plate, slightly maybe 3/16-inch triangular bracing, a thick-walled pipe, and anytime we do a pedestal where we have a pipe inside of a sleeve, we want to make sure that there's not a lot of slop.
Yeah.
Slop is going to cause wiggling, it's going to cause off balance, and you might think you have a perfect fit, and when you get it all set up, you know, it's leaning a little bit one way or the other. So we have a steel sleeve, right? A pipe
Yep.
up inside of the elk, and it actually goes all the way up into the shoulder. It's probably a, I bet you it's a 2.5-foot piece of pipe. In the end of that pipe is a bolt. It's going to be hard to explain. We should actually have one to show them. There's a bolt that goes right through the center of the pipe, and on this inner tube, the inside tube, there is a hole drilled through, and then that was cut off right through that hole, so that bolt will index perfectly into the bigger pipe.
So kind of a U channel that bolt sits horizontally.
So he's gonna, we wanted him looking off of this corner a little bit, and when the bolt is indexed with the yoke, I guess, he's stuck. He's not gonna go right or left. On a base this small, if that elk head got swung way over here, it's gonna tip over just because the balance wouldn't be where we wanted it. So we have those built, and we probably overbuild them. We could hold a Tyrannosaurus Rex on that base, I think. And we have 2 1/2-inch pieces of plywood, and I think there's another pad underneath that. The bottom is a 1x4, nailed and glued, stapled and glued all the way around. Then this whole assembly is going to go down into our walnut table type look, and a rail will go on top to finish it off.
Yeah. So structurally, there's a lot that goes into these pedestals before we even really get started. We had most of this stuff roughed in prior to ever putting the skin on the
And
animal.
explain to them the back, speaking of that, when you can get yourself in trouble by customer comes in and he says, yeah, I'd like this elk made into a pedestal. How much is it going to be? And of course you're going to want to do it because it's a prestigious piece and the guy's, excited about this great big bull. So you think, well, an elk mount might be $1,000 or so. And all I'm going to do is put a little leather on the back and make a little habitat and call it good. You can minimize your work and really get into trouble. But go ahead and explain the back end of that elk, since that wasn't a pedestal to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. This was just a shoulder mount, a standard shoulder form. I think it might have been offset. But to make it into a pedestal, we cut the backboard out of it, which is significant. If you know ahead of time, some of the supply companies will make those for you without a backboard, but we cut the backboard out of it. And then we extended, so we wrapped it around with foam wrapped it around with probably cardboard or printer's tin. We like to use the tin often. Waxed that, poured another probably 8 inches of foam onto the back to extend it, and then we knew we were short with the cape, and so we slid the cape on and used the absolute maximum that we had available to create this shape that we have here. So there was only a few inches left of this animal that we trimmed off, but we marked that, made a nice graceful line out of it. Then we trimmed the foam to that shape, rasped it down, and then, as we talked about last week, we like to have a nice smooth surface on the back, so we bondoed the back of this elk and then sanded that smooth. All of that having been done, we also included, before we did that, a mounting bracket, a plate that we had to put back in so that we could screw a mounting bracket on and mount him on a mounting stand conventionally, because once we cut that backboard out of it, we had to have something, the bondo won't hold it. So we put...
And we do that a lot, even on our deer. If it's going to be a pedestal, we'll put a pad in there, dig in and auto body putty a pad in that we can screw the mounting stand.
We've got another one getting ready to go, and we just put together 2 pieces of 1/2-inch plywood, cut them out, and then we countersink those into the back, and we'll bondo right over top of them. So there'll be a little crack line to fix after we take this square bracket off, but for the most part the back work is done. Then we were able to put him on a stand, and we had to figure out how we were going to get the structure inserted into him, and you have a nice little jig. Do you want to tell them about the jig that we have to drill that hole?
We don't have the jig. We need it. Once upon a time, we made a lot of pedestals, and the trick is to drill the hole that's going to receive the pipe that is around this fairly straight. You want it nice and straight. And many times we've tried to make it straight, got it all set up, only to have the elk or sable or whatever, moose or whatever it happens to be, leaning off, and we have to keep sticking a spade bit up in there and augering it out till we've got a hole probably 4 inches around for a small, 2-inch pipe. So what I came up with was a contraption. It's nothing more than probably a 2-foot by 2-foot piece of 3/4-inch plywood with a 2x4 screwed to the bottom at a perfect perpendicular to the plate, and then I took a piece of PVC pipe. I braced that 2x4 so it's not going to get loose and get off. Took a 1/2 of a PVC pipe and screwed it to the 2x4 nice and straight. So what I have is a plate that goes on the floor with a 1/2 of a PVC pipe fastened to it. Then...
And about how big is that PVC pipe?
I'm going to say it's probably a 2-inch inside diameter.
Inside, yeah.
And it's, what works well is you can take a spade bit in your drill, run that drill up this PVC channel, 1/2 of a pipe, and drill a spade bit hole all the way up in, and because your post in your PVC is nice and straight, you're going to drill a pretty straight hole.
Yep.
And then we have, you go to the hardware store, you can get, oh man, I bet you can get 2-foot extensions that will hold a hex spade bit, and you can get big spade bits, so you can easily, for a few dollars, drill yourself, you can get enough of a drill bit to drill up in there probably about 3 feet. Then we drill up in there, and then we check the fit. Usually at that time we will fasten this apparatus down to something straight like this. If you're doing it on this, we'll probably cover it with plastic so we don't wreck it with the foam and everything. We put the female sleeve over this post, slide this down on it, And then what we like to do is drill a hole up in the top and pour our foam from the top. It works really well rather than trying to turn the elk upside down and pour it. So we got our mannequin. We've got the 2 posts that slide together lined up here. We might take some tape or some clay around so you're not losing all your foam. Take another little spade bit hole and go into your tunnel like a little miner and find that hole, and then you pour your foam in, and your foam is going to go all the way down here and foam all the way up to the top, and it's going to be exceptionally strong. You can use on something really, really heavy, we might use auto body putty. We've done that before, maybe to plug the hole, a little auto body putty, run it down there first. Yeah. You might want to thin it with polyester resin. Heavier foam, we got 10-pound foam too. If you think you really need the strength, 10-pound foam. But if you have it plugged down here and you have an opening up there, you can pour that foam in and it'll foam all the way to the top. Nothing's going to change. Your face is still going to be straight, and works really good. We've done a lot of big pedestals with this type of a system.
And we put, before we drill the hole, we put him on the mounting stand, and we get the attitude of the animal locked in with the stand, so that when you drill that hole straight up and down, it holds that position, and he's right where we want him. So it works really well. It's tough to explain.
Hard to explain it. I hope I helped
there, but no, that's pretty important, and we get all of that work done to the mannequin long before we do anything with the skin. So
and make sure this thing fits. You know, I do first thing we want to do is take it out of the box, and first thing we want to do is test fit it.
Diana would like to know if that is an Iowa whitetail.
It's actually a Wisconsin whitetail.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of people tuning in saying thank you for doing the live seminars. They are very helpful and appreciated. We've got Fred that wants to know what keeps you from tipping forward the elk.
What keeps the elk from tipping forward?
What keeps him from tipping forward the elk?
I think just the balance. And that post, this steel post assembly goes all the way up into there, so it's fastened really, really good. Yep. Now what will also help, when we put those antlers on, the antlers actually will come way over the shoulder. They're a massive set of antlers, and they're heavy, so that will help also.
Yep, they're a good counterbalance, and that's another part of setting up a pedestal. It is a really good question because structurally, he has to be solid. We've made small, petite, nice little pedestals before, and then I'm worried about them getting tippy.
We've made way too big of pedestals before too, and they look silly.
Yeah.
There is a balance, so we try to rough in something like this and stand back and look at it. You can always cut this down before you get your habitat all done, but we did that. Was it on this one?
That one.
We did another one a while back. That we had
put the whole thing on.
Take it and cut the whole base after we got it done because it was just too massive. You want that not to overpower your mount, I guess.
Yep. But still balanced.
Yep.
And
strong.
Be nice and sturdy.
And this is probably going to go in somebody's trophy room who maybe has grandkids or bouncy dogs or something like that. So you want it nice and sturdy. Something I was going to say. What we're talking about now too is a basic brisket mount, I guess I'd call it. Yep. This is coming straight out of the brisket. It's not as artistic as you can be. I mean, there's and we've done a lot of them where we attach them on maybe the back shoulder with maybe a branch coming off. There's a whole lot of different ways. You can use a system similar to this, and you can, we just did a couple of blessed bucks that were off the shoulder and different things like that. So plan this out before you start drilling a whole bunch of holes, and you're gonna have to cut a hole in your hide too. So make sure that you have a plan before you go too far.
Yeah. And then Austin would like to know, what is the dimensions of the base?
Oh gosh. 20-ish, 22-ish by
34.
34. Yeah, that sounds about. We don't have a tape handy,
Yeah, I was
but I bet
gonna
it's.
grab
I bet
one,
we're
but I
pretty
don't think I
close.
can get through the camera equipment.
I can grab it. You want me to grab it?
No, I'm good. I think we're pretty close.
Yeah. And
I did a big brown bear in my early years that ended up in Mexico. And we went to Mexico, and the person who had shot the brown bear had us over to his house. And I was shocked at the base size brown bear correlation. The base could have held another brown bear and maybe a black bear and a wolverine on the same base. I was prepared for more
Generous.
animals. It was very big, and when I saw it, I went, "Oh my gosh!" Working on it in my shop, I was pretty proud of it. Boxed it up, sent it, and when I saw it a year later, I was pretty embarrassed at my artistic composition. It just wasn't developed at that time, I guess.
Oh, that's funny. I remember that bear. I do. That's funny.
I did a couple of them.
So once they have the structure in place, we've got all that. We can go ahead and put the animal together, and that's what we did. We just had the structure here. We had the base. We had the internal workings going, and then we mounted the animal. We'll handle the habitat later. I guess you could do the habitat first if you wanted to. Do all the habitat up to the mannequin. Then once your animal is mounted, he can go right out the door because the habitat's done.
We
and
get a
you
little
can finish
excited
it.
to do the
We do.
animal, so most of the time
We
the
do.
animal's done a little quicker than
Yeah.
the base.
Um,
But your whole goal in the habitat is to cover up your engineering.
Yeah.
And you have to hide that. You have to hide it artistically. I can tell you all these bad things that I did. I did a muskie for the Iowa Taxidermy Association. Tom Sexton judged the muskie, and it was a big fish, and I had to support it somehow. And in those days, we didn't have stores that you could just run up and buy things like you could now. And so I jumped in this buckboard that we had, and I took the horses up to the livery studio. Anyway, but the rod I used, the post was like a 1/2-inch steel bar, and I ran it along the tail up into the muskie. And then I think, how am I going to hide this? So I started taking water, artificial water, and covering it up, and the steel rod is sticking out pretty vividly. So I tore it all off and I painted it white and recovered it with polyester resin, clear scenery resin. Didn't work. Took it apart, painted it silver, and I finally got it somewhat hidden, but not. So be thinking of what you're going to do in this situation, in this situation. Try not to make it blatantly obvious that you put a bush to cover it up or a cactus to cover it up. You know, have it discreetly camouflaged.
We see that in the competition room often,
Sure.
especially with the reptiles. It seems like they get mounted, and then you can see all the little grains of sand stuck between their toes just to get the feet to conform and
Attachment's very important, and you got to be able to hide it.
Chris would like to know if a wall pedestal can be substituted for a floor pedestal.
Sure, we do it all the time. So what we do is take the wall pedestal, either buy it without the board or cut it. Now, that's probably a lot more difficult now because supply companies are crazy behind trying to keep up. Special ordering will just put you behind farther. But normally, when your order's just out a few days, I would order it without the backboard in it. You know, that saves everybody time. The supply companies appreciate it, and you can just start cutting right away. Then we cut the board off, wrap it with, like you said, printer's tin is a good thing to have in the shop. Wax cardboard, pop box cardboard. You can make sure you wax it, or you're going to have orange crush all the way around your perimeter of your deer. And then fill it in with foam, and then with your little artistic flair, shape it the way you want to on the back. Yeah, we do that quite a bit.
Yeah. Saves you going from a shoulder mount. Just saves you a little foam.
And we do it with not just wall pedestals, we do it with wall mounts, just like we did on this.
Yep.
We have no problem taking a whitetail from the supply company, either getting it without the backboard or cutting the backboard off. You need to extend a little bit or you're going to end up shortening yourself. And you mentioned something earlier that we want to make sure we touch on again, is we test fitted this as you were sculpting that back, and make sure that you have enough hide, because you don't want to spend a day and a half, 2 days making the most beautiful bondo backed elk or zebra or whatever it happens to be, only to find out that you're going to have to patch 2 inches of hair around the perimeter of that animal, which is going to look terrible. So a lot of times what we'll do is take a mannequin and pin the skin on, and then even measure and know that you've got 3 inches or 2 inches or whatever. And once you're done with it, double check.
Yeah, check.
Or you're going to be pulling and pulling and pulling and trying to get another inch to go around your form. So there's a lot of different ways to do these things. This is kind of one of our common methods that we do a lot, and it works pretty good, and we'll just kind of keep progressing from here. So type in any of your questions and stuff like that. We'll try to keep them answered. Then what did we do here? Then we got to decide on what kind of rock, what kind of habitat you're going to have. This could be a pile of dirt.
Mound.
Yeah, we've done all kinds of things. It could be, we got great cactus down in the supply company. You can run heavy rod up through the cactus. Probably not on this animal, but on a whitetail or a mule deer would really look nice. But you got to figure out how you're going to cover this rod or how you're going to attach that animal. And this one is going to be all rock, and this one too is going to be rock. And we've made rocks for years and years and years. And I think if you look back in our archives, and I'm not sure what it's going to be called, but making shale rocks, I know we showed it before.
So. Yeah.
We made latex molds of real rocks. And this is what a latex mold looks like. And we found a really nice shale rock and started painting it with rubber latex. And inside is the exact texture that rubber latex was. So we paint a coat on. If you've never worked with rubber latex, it's real fun to use, not overly expensive. Paint that rock with 1 coat of rubber latex, let it dry to the touch, paint it with another coat, and we'll usually put on 3 coats. It dries very thin, like latex gloves, I guess. And then you need some kind of a stability. You need wall thickness, and the latex is extremely thin. It dries down thin as it evaporates and leaves you with a thin rubber film. To build up the wall thickness, this one was made with gauze. You can see the gauze impression on the outside, and it's very similar to fiberglass. We do a lot of fiberglassing here, and you put down your rubber latex, put a strip of gauze in it, saturate the gauze with rubber latex, and just keep on going all the way around the whole rock. And I think the last time we did this, I was telling the story how Mark and Mandy were like little kids. They were probably in elementary school, and for their summer job, we had a whole bunch of big boulders, like coffee table sized boulders. Still have them out here, and they've been here for 30 years. Yeah. And anyway, they started making probably the same mold, rubber latex mold, and after it gets to a certain thickness, which really takes days, we'd cover them up with canvas overnight, or kind of a tarp overnight, and when they got the wall thickness as thick as we needed, you just grab onto the edge of it and you pull it off, and you will have a beautiful mold of that rock. And look back in our archives. It's very fun to do. You can make all different kind of rocks. Whatever rock kind of catches your fancy. Start out small till you get your system figured out, and then we even have a kit in the supply company of how to make rocks, and it has directions and things like that. But these are indispensable, and with something like this, you can make, you know, whole big rock structures. Yes, ma'am.
Austin would like to know, whose rock panel are you using?
This one is a Habitat rock,
Yep.
Dale Manning's Habitat rock, and there was only probably one, and then there's a couple good rock companies, and now you go to, you know, like the World Show or something like that, and there's 3 or 4
Several, yeah.
rock panels.
Yeah.
This one that we make, and we don't sell these, but this is just something that we have that we chew. We go out in the storage and we pull out our molds and make these from time to time. But this rock was made with auto body putty, so it's much tougher than rock panels. And the Habitat rock and most of the others are reasonably thick. This is probably 3/4 to 1 inch in some areas. Comes in a sheet. Do you know how big those sheets are? They must be.
Oh, they're about 4 by 8, I think,
Yeah.
or close.
And you can buy, I think you can buy half sheets, you can buy full sheets. And they got a great texture to them. Anytime you get, it's nice to have some references on that stuff. Dale's are, I don't know, I'd have to say as good as they get. We like using them. They come in a lot of different styles.
Yeah.
And just so they have a lot of texture. The more texture they have, the nicer it is to paint, because it'll show up a lot more detail. Yeah.
And then Charlie would like to know, before pouring the foam in, do you use a demold oil?
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
If now, back up just a little bit. When you paint this on the wall, on the rock, you don't need any mold release. Rubber latex will peel right off of anything with no mold release. When you begin to make the positive, you will need a mold release in here, and mineral oil works pretty well. And just take mineral oil like you would get in the grocery store, hardware store, and smear your mold. We usually like a plastic shell, so we will take thinned out auto body putty and rotate it around, and then pour foam in the middle, which gives us something like this. So this is plastic coated with auto body putty. And you can pour just foam ones too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different things you can make your positives out of. And like I said, this is Dale Manning's Habitat rock, and comes in a sheet, so you're going to have to estimate what kind of shape you want your rock. And you started this one. I can see a piece here and a piece here and a piece here, and out of a flat sheet. Now, how did you do that without? This doesn't look like a flat sheet anymore.
It doesn't. We just took, so our goal was to build it up tall enough and create something, somewhat of a structure that would cover our steel here. And all we did was take the rock itself and start breaking up little small sections of it. We cut it. It's foam, so it cuts super easy. We use this little Irwin knife that I think we got these for cutting our deer noses off of our mannequins, and they work really well.
That's a very handy tool in the shop.
They really are. And so we'll use this. We'll make a few cuts in it, and then it's kind of nice to break these to give an irregular shape. You can see there are some lines that we've some strong cut lines from the saw, but we'll also break them, and then we just put the pieces together and kind of with screws or T-pins built a shape that kind of fit together with our other side. And you can see there was a piece here. I think we might have started with this one here, and I think one of the gals had started this structure earlier, and we just kind of finished it up and started tacking it all together. But you can put screws in or T-pins to temporarily hold it in place, and if you decide you want to move something, just pull the screw out and maybe check another panel. And there's no real science to it. It's just test fit pieces, and do watch your textures and your grain lines. There are different panels available, so if you use from one panel, I'd probably stay with that texture series. I know there's some river rock series and some shale rock series.
We made some real nice fish bases out of the
Yeah.
river rock. They're real pretty.
I think you'd want to be careful not to get those intermixed, but then we just come up with kind of a shape and tack them all together, and then we used foam behind it, and this is just the spray foam. You could, the nice thing about the spray foam is there's some body and it expands quickly and doesn't leak through the seams quite as much. And then we let that set up, we flipped it over, and then we did texture work with bondo. I think every rock company has a little different method for doing that texture work, the seam work. But we like to do bondo. I think you started doing that with your latex molds back when you were riding the buggy to go get supplies. But they make a really, really nice texture, and we might show them some of that today. How to do the seam work.
When I first started taxidermy, everybody made bases out of burlap and plaster. And the rocks were made out of burlap and plaster. The base work was made out of burlap and plaster. And it was very common to see maybe a octagon like this, if anybody went fancy enough to do an octagon, and they would maybe take chicken wire and staple it around the edge so it gave it some kind of ground contour, and then they would cut strips of burlap, just gunny sack burlap, run it through a thin slurry of plaster, watered down plaster, and drape it over the chicken wire. And when the plaster set, it actually made a firm enough base that you could put another layer of plaster on. Burlap and plaster bases, nobody ever colored the plaster, which I think I would have done, but all they have to do is get hit or bumped or chipped, and all of a sudden you have white plaster everywhere on that base. And we would used to clean a lot of trophy rooms, and you'd go into a trophy room, and I mean, here's a beautiful desert bighorn on a nice little rock outcropping and things like that, all made out of plaster and burlap. And the base, I mean, the mount after many years looks great, but after just a short time, the plaster and burlap chipped or always cracked. And so we ended up redoing a lot of bases and that sort of thing. So this is a much better, sturdier. When we fill the inside, you shoot that great stuff or that spray foam in there, this will literally be, now if I stood on it right now, we'd break it.
Yep.
Maybe not me, but a much bigger guy would break it. But once you spray that great stuff, it's somewhat soft. It's not very strong, but it's way strong enough combined with this that you could walk on it and it's going to last for many years.
It'll withstand lots of grandkids and dogs.
Yeah,
and pets.
yeah. Well, we can show you. Should I show them on a whitetail over here? And
Yep. So I think the key to all of it is how you execute your seam work. You can put all these neat pieces together and make a really nice little structure, little sandcastle if you were a kid. If you like doing that, you're probably really good at this. But the success of it is going to be how well you do your seams, how well you put these pieces together and make a convincing transition between the foam edges. So you've kind of got a pretty nice method, Tom, of doing that that's quick and easy. There's all kinds of different ways. I think Dale has a video maybe on YouTube of a method that they use to put their seams together.
always use the right tool for the right job.
Right tool for the right job. But you can look up that method too. But this is just simple bondo. You're just going to use the body filler to do some seam work.
And we use a lot of body filler in the shop. I mean, it's, if it wasn't for body filler, we probably wouldn't have a business, but we do use a lot. Any of you that have never used auto body putty, we like our auto body putty, and it's by Auto Body Master, and number's lightweight body filler number 4401. But we've used we refer to it as bondo because when we first started using this, that's all everybody ever used was bondo, and since then we've gravitated to Auto Body Master. It's very smooth, mixes really nice, consistent set time. We just like it. But there's a lot of different kinds in the market. There's hundreds with different kind of fillers and all kinds of different things that they put in to keep your fenders on and that sort of thing.
We might be jumping ahead a little bit, but Austin wants to know, how do you paint your rock?
Oh, Austin's going right along with us. I bet we will get to painting probably next week.
I think
maybe
so.
a little bit. We'll get some of this seam work done and we'll go into that, but that's the next step. Don't you always say color and texture?
Yeah.
We'll
no matter what you do in
texture.
this business, I've always said color and texture, color and texture.
Yeah.
You can't make this look like a rock without texture and color. You can't make this look like a deer without texture or color, no matter what. You can't make a fish look like a fish. So there's only two elements to this business, texture and color. This is a piece of cake business. Okay, auto body putty, no matter what kind you use, usually has a resin, which I used. I put in here. Comes in different colors too, so if you're buying it in the store, auto body parts store, make sure that you know what color. I don't want to have a pink rock. I don't want to have a green rock. Though I would work with it if I did. You know, it's not the end of the world. Hardener. This is the catalyst. A lot of the directions in some of the cans say 1 inch for every golf ball size. I'm assuming I have a couple golf balls here. I'm going to put a couple inches plus so we don't waste a lot of time. This hardener, it's called a cream hardener, comes in lots of different colors. Comes in greens and blues and pinks, all different colors. If you have white, you're going to end up with a gray rock, which is going to be much closer to this, and I'm going to have a lot less fixing to do.
Kevin would like to know, is the auto body filler cheaper than bondo, and in tensile strength, is it comparable?
It depends on how much you buy and the quantities, but we find it a little bit cheaper.
And bondo is getting hard to find, and the price is going up. So check with your local retailers for prices, because we can tell you, yes, it's cheaper, but it may not be. It may not be tomorrow. It might be today, but
and mix it so that there's no marbling in here. Make sure it's a little bit harder when you have white and a light gray. It's a little bit harder to make sure you got it mixed well. But if you think it's mixed well, a few more stirs will make sure.
Yeah.
Now, I'm just gonna. I don't want to cover up. This is all real nice texture up here, so I don't want to cover up all that nice texture. I'm going to try to keep it right to the cut itself. And you don't have to do this in one time. You can come back and get most of it, and if you have a little spot that you miss, come back and get that later. Now I do have pins. I don't want to auto body putty my pins in, so I'm going to be a little careful there. I just took these large tongue depressors, I guess they're called. I took them on the sander and I made them flat, so they're a little, like, they're easier for me to make them work like a spatula, like a trowel kind of. Now you want to get this on here, but you don't want it to start setting up before we texture. So don't mix up more than what you can use, and I'm going to say 7-8 minutes.
Craig Robertson says, "Hey Tom and Brett, good to see Tom still measures carefully."
You learn that after a while, kind of have a good little measurement system. Could you hand me that lacquer thinner over there?
Sure can.
And this is just some lacquer thinner that I cleaned a brush with today, so I have a little bit left over, and I thought rather than dispose of it, I can use it. And lacquer thinner works really good to, it's stuck, there we go. Lacquer thinner works really good to kind of not stick to your brush and stuff like that. So I'm just going to work it into the crack, feather it out. Now there may be some touch-ups later where I can see my cut doesn't look very natural, so I can come back and texture that at any time. Don't work too much lacquer thinner into it because it's going to turn your auto body putty squishy, kind of too soft.
Marco would like to know, how long does it take to dry compared to Bondo?
I'd say the same. All depends on how much hardener you put in.
Yep.
You put more of this in, it's gonna set up way faster. You put less in, you have more time, but more time for it to do something bad too.
Yeah, all temperature and catalyst related, but about the same.
Now sometimes, if you're getting a really nice texture and you don't have brush marks, things like that, keep going with the brush. I like to use a sponge, and this is just a natural sea sponge, and you can tear them in chunks or you can use the whole thing. I usually will end up wrecking this in one project, but by dipping that in lacquer thinner, it turned really soft, and this will give me a better texture than the brush will. And I'm just gonna, as it's setting, I'm gonna give it just a little bit of sponge texture. And now I've done this area here. I don't like, I've got a 3-inch stretch right here that looks like a straight line. I'm gonna leave that until it hardens up. Then I'll come in and put a little bit more on there and take out that straight line. What do we always say in nature? There's no blacks, there's no whites, and there's no straight lines.
Straight lines.
Or flat surfaces. So kind of use those kind of rules when you're making this. As you're putting these panels together, you said there's no rules, just, you know, kind of start and kind of see where it goes. But as you go a little while, stand back and just look at it before you get too far and have bondoed up the whole thing, because it's not too late to change the shape of this. Maybe it's too blunt, or maybe it's too sharp or too square. Whatever you did, it's not too late, but we can always pull a piece off and resituate it or retrim it, or, you know, that sort of thing. Yeah. But that's how we would do every seam in the entire base.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then once this is done, I noticed you poured foam on the front of this elk.
Might turn him a little bit for you.
And that kind of goes with what we were saying. There's plenty of, especially in Iowa, we got a lot of flat ground, but this was a nice plywood earth. And we got nice rock coming out of here, and we could have covered this with dirt, but it would have looked exactly like that. It would have looked like a beautiful rustic rock and a plywood field, board. You know. So you took the foam, our deer foam, our 3-pound deer foam, and you poured that to conform this down into a base the more natural you can make it, the nicer it's going to be. And another thing, we do a lot of grass. We've got that great habitat grass that lasts forever, and it's hard to plant, because we'll show you how to do that on this next week probably. It's hard to plant into wood, but it's really easy to plant into foam. That foam is hard, and we will make little places for it to go, and we'll plant our grasses. We'll have rock. The more elements you put in here, I know you picked out a beautiful, beautiful piece of branch that's going to go on there, kind of twisted cedar. Rock and earth is great. Rock and earth and a rustic branch is even better. Rock and earth and a rustic branch and some grass growing around it natural is going to look so natural. You can't believe it.
Yeah. We'll add several elements, and that was real simple. We just poured the 3-pound foam over here and sanded and shaped. We rasped it down to get it to conform. You can also use it structurally inside your rock, and we used some of it up under here just to make this adhere to the base. So we have a screw in there that we put this down for temporary, but then we poured the foam and allowed the foam to run under and up onto that rock. So that's actually creating the strength of the bottom. And then this was some great stuff foam that we put underneath here. And then kind of the same here, you can see that we used, this was just the great stuff. And a lot of times we'll actually put our pieces together, and then we'll inject the foam with the straw, and we'll shake this up and spray it all and let it ooze out. You know, if you've ever used this before, you know it expands at least twice its size normally, and it takes overnight to do that. We'll let it expand, and then we'll cut it off. And then there are some areas that you can see here where there's a few little openings. We'll let that foam actually ooze out, then we'll cut it off smooth, and then we'll do our bondo texture over those areas.
And that gives nice support, so you're not dropping bondo through big cracks.
Yep. Takes a lot of the weight out of it. If we were to try to fill this crack with bondo, one, like you said, it would be dropping away, and two, even if we did manage to get it to span that gap, it would start gaining a lot of weight quickly.
Now my auto body putty is set up in this, pretty hard, but it's still a little soft where it's thinned, and I can get it off of the good rock to preserve my texture and still give it a little bit of texture on the crack. So I think that much of that is going to look really, really natural. I'm going to come back and patch a little bit of that. The next time you see this, next week, we'll have all of this done. Maybe we'll show you painting on one or both of these. Yeah. Maybe we'll have one painted for you and kind of show you our process of painting it. We've got earth to do. We got grasses to do. Your neat log. Yeah. Our walnut base. We've got a beautiful walnut base that this is going to go in. Put the horns on it, and it won't look like a cow.
Yeah.
Jim would like to know, does the elk head come off of the base?
Luckily, yes.
It does, and that's a good question. It's always when you build something like this and pour bondo down the hole and you've got two pieces fitting together, you cross your fingers and hope, and yeah, he does, and we'll show you that too. Maybe we'll show you that too.
I did. I used to have my business in my basement when I was 1974. I did a buffalo, and I was so proud of my buffalo, and I went to take it up the stairway, and it would not go through the stairway door. No. There was nothing you could do to get it through the stairway door. I had to cut a horn off to get it. After it's mounted, like this, I had to cut a horn off to get it up the stairway door. Things like that will happen. That wasn't even a pedestal, that was just a mount. So make sure everything's gonna come apart. Your problem, this we're gonna deliver, and we're gonna end up, probably one person is gonna drive this, to southern Iowa, and it's too much for one person to do. Unless each horn comes off, weighs nothing. The elk itself might weigh 40 pounds. That will come off, and then this base comes out of the walnut base, so everything is a bite-sized little piece. We set up the walnut base, we slip this into it, we lift up the elk, put it in, one horn, it's a one-person job.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we learned that the hard way.
Yeah, and make sure all those parts are fitting and working together, like you said. Make sure they go out the door. Make sure they come apart.
And it just
before it's
takes a
all
little pre-thought.
Yes, a lot.
Austin would like to know if you have ever used dragon skin rubber to texture your rocks.
Sure. We have lots and lots of different rubber molds.
Sure.
We have silicone molds. We have latex molds. We have
Yeah.
a box. My drawers are full of them,
Impression
and that's a good
pads
thing too. The only thing is, you got to make sure that this is not too soft
Yeah.
and not too hard that it won't take your texture. And then what he's taken of is dragon skin is it is a platinum cure silicone rubber. Mix a catalyst with it and pour it over your rock. Peel it off, and you have a texture pad which you can push into here and duplicate this texture.
And there are other things that you can do if you were to use impression pads that might be a little bit more fitting. I think Bondo, you'd lose that impression pad unless you left the pad on there. But there's Easy Carve.
Easy Carve.
That's a nice one.
A product that
lightweight.
we've been using a lot of here is Easy Carve, and it's a similar to epoxy sculpt, magic sculpt, all the different epoxies. It weighs nothing. It is the lightest material. If I was making model airplanes, I'd live on Easy Carve. But for fish heads and things like that, and it holds its body so you can texture it and it doesn't sag.
Yep.
There's a lot of neat products out there. Everybody has several. Too many to try, you know.
Nicole would like to know where you get the foam. I believe she's regarding the one in the black can.
That's just our local hardware store carries.
Ace, we got it at Ace. Is that where you got it?
Yeah, 74 different kinds. This
There
says
is.
up to 3 inch. This is a big gap filler. There's a small gap filler. There's a colored. I saw there's one for windows and doors. There's all different stuff. There's really no rhyme or reason to it. I got the 3 today just because it's going to take up more space. I think there's an up to 1 inch, and then this one that was.
It all
up to
seems
3.
to work for us.
Yeah, I'd go with the inexpensive route because you're going to use a fair amount. And worth stating too, once you crack this can open, it's probably not going to function for you again. So this is a one-time use. They come in a couple different sizes, so once you've used it a time or two, you'll get a feel for how much volume you're going to need.
Awesome. Looks like that is it for questions. We had a lot of people tune in. So
Okay, should we do our giveaway?
Yes.
And our giveaway today is your Irwin knife.
Yeah.
You will like this. We use it. We got it mainly, like you said, for cutting the noses off and putting artificial noses on because it makes a paper thin cut in the foam.
Yeah.
Works
super flexible.
Great for habitat.
Really just handy for all around use. For sculpting backs, it's super, super sharp and works great.
And the winner is
Charlie Chambers.
Charlie Chambers. Congratulations. You'll like that.
And Mandy is tuning in also. She
Oh,
says, great
no.
job, guys.
Charlie had to like and share.
Yes. Yes. So like and share this
Congratulations,
video.
Charlie. You're going to like it. And he gets that with his first order.
That is correct. Yep, it will be included.
Next week, we're going to proceed on these. I don't know. We probably won't get finish, but we'll get pretty close and see how far we can get. And this applies to, I mean, this can apply to a bird group. It could apply to a fish. It can apply to a deer head, elk head, zebra. We got a zebra over here.
Yeah.
We've got all kinds of pedestals going. Maybe we'll get them all and line them up when we get them done and show you a few different versions because you can go so many different directions. This one's in a walnut base. The Blessed Buck were in a really neat twisted
cedar,
twisted cedar kind of. And you know, you just when you see that, when you see those branches and things like that, and you think, wow, that would be good for, pick it up and save it. You know, you're going to want it.
Yeah.
All right, we will see you